Good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Alan Bruce, and I have been asked to respond to the points made by Mike Millington in his keynote. And I think that this is a critical presentation because it brings to a head the issues and concerns we have facing rehabilitation counselling as it emerges and develops within the 20th century, within the 21st century, and with the crises and issues we now face. From Mike's presentation, I take a couple of key points which I'd like to review in terms of my own response, and then I would like to give some of my observations based on my perspectives, both as somebody living and working in Europe, and second of all, as somebody who has been involved with rehabilitation for many years on a personal level. Taking Mike's point, the first thing I think came through to me is that we are talking about rehabilitation counselling at this time and place being an emerging global profession. Based in the past, based on models of rehabilitation in different countries, this is now becoming something different, and it is global, which I will come back to. A key point Mike made is that it transcends the United States. It transcends United States concerns. This is an international phenomenon. And therefore, we need to be able to look, in Mike's phrase, at vision, at values and mission we have. And finally, he talked about excellence, evidence, and innovation as being the foundations for the way forward. I think these points made by Mike in his keynote are critical because for me, they sum up three important things. One is the question of the nature and the scale and the scope of change facing us and facing this profession. Secondly, it's the need for all of us involved in this field to undergo a radical rethink about what this profession is and what our role is within it. And finally, that magic, wonderful word of value. What do we value? What is of worth? Mike developed from this to talk with this wonderful framework he had on community-based inclusive development. And under that, you will recall the 6 headings that I found really a wonderful framework for us to go forward. Health, education, employment, social dimensions, environmental, and this wonderful word of empowerment. And for me, these insights and perspectives that Mike offered give us a framework for action. They also give us the determinants for the dimensions of social justice, which is what this symposium is about and which our profession increasingly needs to address. Where does this leave us? With the observations that Mike has made, drawing on his research and his experience, we are left with 4 challenges for traditional rehabilitation counselling. The first, for me, is the question of identity. What exactly is rehabilitation counselling, and what is the role of the rehabilitation counsellor? Second of all, function. What do we do? This is linked to how do we do it, but critically, what do we do when other people may be able to do it as well, if not better? What is the unique voice we have in terms of what is operationalized? The third issue is relevance. How relevant is rehabilitation counselling to the world we're in now? Where is its voice? Where is its profile? Where is the image of what we do, standing out from others? And finally, politics or policy. What do we stand for? What difference do we make? These are key and critical points for us to reflect on going forward. So let me come and talk a little bit more about how I see this profession or the role of this within the framework of social justice. I think there are a couple of issues here. One is the question of how do we build capacity? How do we begin to look at things around advocacy? Mike has mentioned this very well in some of the issues that he has brought up. How do we focus on solutions, the solutions that are needed by us and needed above all by those with whom we work? How do we manage the resources given to us? And finally, how do we network and with whom? This leads me to a number of hard questions we have to ask. When we look at the population of those impacted by disability, we see a consistent and clear issue, universal and in all countries. Those with disabilities are perennially at the bottom. They're at the bottom economically, they're at the bottom vocationally, they're at the bottom in terms of employment, they're at the bottom in terms of expectation for a full life. Why does this happen? There are other groups also excluded, so there's a clear path forward indicated. Rather than linking with images or myths of the normal or the mainstream, we need to link with those who are similarly excluded and dispossessed. It is, after all, the system. Who owns our profession? Who owns rehabilitation counselling? Is something I would like to see us focus on. Is it owned by universities or university programs? Is it owned by the state or the various states? Is it owned by corporations, multinationals? Is it owned by people with disabilities? I think each of us can look into our hearts and our experience and answer some of these questions, but it is a critical one because who owns has power. As I mentioned, I live and work in Europe, and we have European realities that impinge upon the question of rehabilitation and its future. And these I'd like to maybe highlight. First of all, is the complete reliance on occupational safety and health as a critical factor. The need to embed disability and its future and its needs within the area of social inclusion, access and integration, on which Europe has made significant progress. The question of age and aging-related disabilities dominates many European countries' thoughts. The question of inward migration, migration within the Union, critical issues, all of us leading to the overwhelming need at European level for policy and for coordination. Finally, my observations as a person active in this field for many years. And in thanking Mike for his contribution and for the comprehensiveness of his insight, I'd like to touch on some things from my point of view. I believe firmly that social justice will be served by going to the community. But we need to ask, what is community? What does it mean? We know what it's not. It's not anomie and isolation and absolutely surreal selfishness and narcissism. It is about others and others acting collectively. Nothing will happen with rehabilitation in a positive sense unless we move unapologetically and clearly towards a rights-based approach. Human rights must be at the center of everything we do and everything we think and why we do it. Rehabilitation will have no meaning or no significance unless we move towards an international understanding and dimension, including everything from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals right across to nothing we do is done without reference to international norms and standards. We must indeed address oppression, but we must go from oppression to liberation. We must look at the critical need for innovation and research, educational delivery, shaping those who work in this field. And in everything we do, technology, and there is more and more technology coming, from artificial intelligence right through to all forms of integrated systems. We must have that technology at the core. We must, in fact, be, as we always have been, leaders in that field. We must address intersectionality, that issues around disability and the exclusion occasioned by the experience of disability have a direct link with issues around gender, sexual orientation, ethnic origin, language, culture, all these things that distinguish us in our diversity as human beings. We should go back, therefore, to the works of Paulo Freire, and we must adopt an unapologetic stance of the pedagogy of the oppressed. We must understand that we work with and for and among the oppressed. Our role, therefore, is clear. I think in Europe what we have done gives much to offer, but for all of us now, for all of us working in rehabilitation, but particularly in the United States, which has been the origin of this, it is time for action. It is time to take responsibility. And taking responsibility for transformation is, I suggest, the way forward for our field and for our profession. Thank you.